Arun Malik was elbow-deep inside a malfunctioning plasma conduit when they came for him. He was crouched in the maintenance crawlspace of orbital relay K-47, shoulders wedged between humming pipes, fingers slick with coolant and grease. A thin burn scar ran along his jaw from a reactor flare years ago. His knuckles were permanently rough, skin split in places where alloy edges had bitten too deep. His eyes were tired in the way only long shifts and low pay could make them. The station was old. Just like everything humans owned in this galaxy. Panels rattled when cargo haulers docked. Gravity flickered on Deck 7 if you leaned too hard against the wrong wall. Half the systems were patched with recycled components from decommissioned warships. But he kept it running. That was what he did. He fixed things nobody else cared about. When the filtration grid clogged, he cleared it. When the comm array stuttered, he realigned it by hand. When power dipped in the refugee sectors, he rerouted it quietly. Nobody important. Just a human engineer with a toolkit and a stubborn streak. He fixes broken things. And somewhere beyond the outer docking ring, something very old had just noticed. They did not dock. They arrived. Space outside orbital relay K-47 folded inward without warning. No approach vector. No engine signature. One moment the stars were distant and harmless. The next, they bent. A vessel of impossible geometry emerged from the distortion, its surface a seamless lattice of dark metal etched with flowing constellations. It did not request permission to berth. The station systems granted it automatically. Arun felt it before he saw it. Every console in the maintenance corridor flickered to standby. Tools powered down in his hands. The plasma conduit he had been repairing sealed itself mid-spark, as if intimidated. The airlocks cycled without command input. They stepped through in silent formation. Tall, armored in radiant alloy that shimmered between silver and black. Their helms were smooth, featureless crescents reflecting the station's dim lights. No visible weapons. None needed. Gravity seemed to prefer them. Dockworkers scattered. Supervisors went rigid. No one interfered. Arun climbed out of the crawlspace slowly, wiping grease on his already stained uniform. He became sharply aware of the oil on his cheek, the tear in his sleeve, the ache in his shoulders. He looked small in the corridor's harsh lighting. The lead figure advanced one precise step. A column of pale light scanned him from boots to brow. Human designation, Arun Malik, the voice intoned. It was calm, perfectly modulated, stripped of emotion. You have been registered for Celestial Convergence Trial. You will come with us. Arun blinked. He glanced over his shoulder as if someone more qualified might be standing there. Sorry, he said, voice dry. There must be a mistake. There is no mistake. The corridor felt narrower. I'm maintenance, Arun added, gesturing vaguely toward the conduit. Power routing, life support patches, occasional hull weld. I don't do convergences. Selection criteria exceed your current comprehension. Not hostile. Not mocking. Just final. Two of the armored figures stepped forward in perfect synchronization. The station lights brightened automatically around them, as though eager to assist. Behind Arun, his supervisor lowered their gaze. No resistance. Arun swallowed, then nodded once. Do I at least get to grab my toolkit? A fractional pause. Minimal personal effects are permitted. He reached for his worn metal case, the hinges squeaking in protest. Nobody important. Just a human engineer being escorted by beings who could bend space like paper. He fixes broken things. He just didn't understand why something powerful enough to warp stars thought he was one of them. The Convergence Hall was built to intimidate species into silence. Tiered balconies spiraled upward into a ceiling that resembled a captive galaxy, stars turning in slow, deliberate arcs. Banners of conquered civilizations shimmered in suspended light. At the center stood a circular dais carved from a single slab of pale cosmic stone. Arun stood on it alone. Grease still darkened the cuff of his sleeve. His boots were scuffed from station corridors, not battlefields. The metal toolkit rested at his feet, dented but functional. Above him, seated upon a throne of crystalline starlight, was the High Scion of the Celestial Accord. Their form was tall and luminous, draped in living constellations that shifted with each breath. At their side stood the Grand Commander, armor-plated in the fossilized cores of dead suns. The commander stepped forward first. "This," he announced, voice amplified across the vast chamber, "is the human candidate?" Soft laughter rippled through the gathered elites. The High Scion's gaze settled on Arun, cool and distant. "You are a stain on this trial." The words fell gently, which made them worse. Arun didn't answer. He adjusted his grip on the handle of his toolkit without thinking. The commander descended the steps in 3 controlled strides. He stopped before Arun and looked down at the case like it was contamination. "You bring implements," the commander said, almost curious, "to a convergence of cosmic will." He reached down, lifted the toolkit effortlessly in one armored hand. The alloy hinges squealed. Then he crushed it. Metal folded inward with a violent crunch. Latches snapped. Tools inside shattered under impossible pressure. The case collapsed into a warped, useless lump and dropped to the stone floor at Arun's feet. Laughter echoed louder this time. The commander's voice hardened. "You repair machinery," he said. "You patch leaks. You preserve decay. You are powerless here." Arun stared at the twisted remains. For a long moment, he did nothing. Then he crouched. "Human," said nothing. He picked up the broken pieces. A bent wrench. A cracked diagnostic tablet. A screwdriver split clean down the shaft. He gathered them carefully, as if they still mattered. Because they did. The chamber mistook his silence for submission. But humans did not argue when things broke. They rebuilt. And somewhere deep within the foundation of the Convergence Hall, ancient mechanisms older than the Accord stirred at the touch of a man who fixed broken things. The Convergence Hall vanished. Arun hit solid ground hard enough to knock the air from his lungs. When his vision cleared, he was standing on a fractured plain beneath a sky split by violent auroras. Lightning crawled horizontally across the atmosphere. The air tasted metallic. The trial whirled. A geyser of superheated plasma erupted 50 meters to his left. Then another. Then another. Not random. Sequential. Arun rolled behind a jagged outcrop and watched instead of running. 1, 2, 3. The first vent flared again exactly on the 4th count. Pressure cycling. He shifted position, observing the subtle shimmer in the air above each fissure before eruption. A distortion, barely visible, preceded ignition by half a second. Warning sign. He moved during the gap. Not fast. Efficient. Plasma roared behind him, missing by meters. Above, the Accord observers watched for spectacle. Energy bursts. Hidden strength. A sudden awakening. They saw none. Arun slid down into a shallow depression as shards of mineral rained from above. He pressed his palm to the ground. Vibration. Different from the vents. Rhythmic. Mechanical. He scanned the horizon and spotted a partially exposed structure embedded in the rock, ancient alloy ribs jutting from the crust. Not natural. Infrastructure. He reached it during the next safe interval. The surface was scorched, but beneath a cracked panel he found crystalline conduits flickering erratically. The lightning in the sky wasn't purely atmospheric, it was being drawn, misdirected. Grounding failure. He wiped ash from his eyes and examined the mineral deposits around the breach. Conductive paste had hardened unevenly, causing energy to arc unpredictably. "Of course," he muttered. He scraped loose mineral sediment and mixed it with finer dust, creating a crude insulating layer. With the unbroken half of his bent wrench, he pried a conduit back into alignment and wedged a shard of stone to stabilize the connection. The structure hummed. Lightning strikes shifted away from his position. Not gone. Redirected. The plasma vents began firing with more consistent timing. The world was still hostile. Still lethal. But now it was predictable. Arun leaned back against the alloy rib, breathing hard. No glowing aura. No cosmic force. Just observation. Pattern recognition. Practical repair. He survived because he was clever. Because systems, no matter how ancient or divine, still followed rules. And he fixed broken things. The storm did not intensify. It steadied. Arun remained crouched beside the exposed alloy framework, one hand resting against the repaired conduit. The lightning still carved across the sky, but it no longer struck at random. The plasma vents still roared, but in disciplined intervals. The world felt calibrated. He exhaled slowly, listening to the hum beneath his palm. Then the hum changed. Not louder, deeper, as if something vast had shifted its weight far below the crust. High above the trial world, beyond the visible auroras and the Accord sensor lattice, space did not distort. It focused. Across the plain, jagged rock formations cast longer shadows than the light source allowed. Fine mineral dust lifted briefly from the ground, hovering without wind before settling again. Arun frowned slightly and glanced at the sky. "Great," he murmured. "That's new." The exposed structure behind him vibrated once, subtle enough that most species would have dismissed it as residual energy discharge. But it was not discharge. It was response. Deep beneath the engineered layers of the trial world, older constructs stirred. Not mechanisms of the Accord. Not part of the convergence. Something foundational. Something that predated the banners, the thrones, the rituals. It did not awaken in surprise. It adjusted in recognition. Across the far ridge, a massive silhouette, stone or creature, impossible to tell, shifted its orientation. Toward him. The lightning overhead forked outward in symmetrical arcs, briefly illuminating patterns in the cloud layer that resembled vast, unblinking eyes. Arun felt it then. Not fear. Not pressure. Attention. Precise. Deliberate. Not the way a predator studies prey. The way an engineer studies a working system. The way something ancient confirms a variable it has been waiting to observe. He swallowed, suddenly aware of how small he was on that fractured plane. "I didn't break anything," he said quietly to no one. The ground beneath his boots warmed, not dangerously. Steadily. Acknowledging presence. Somewhere beyond time's comfortable measure, beyond recorded myth and archived star charts. Something ancient looked at him. Not by accident. Like it had been waiting. The trial world dissolved into radiant fragments of light. Arun stood once more in the Convergence Hall, beneath the turning galaxy ceiling, before an audience that expected spectacle. The Grand Commander raised a hand. "Let the bonds be witnessed." The first candidate stepped forward, a towering war scion wrapped in crackling gravitational fields. He thrust both arms outward, and space bent visibly around him. The floor fractured in a controlled spiral as a colossal void beast emerged from a rift, its body composed of compressed starlight and singularity mass. It roared once and bowed its head to him. The balconies erupted in thunderous approval. Next came a crystalline aristocrat whose body refracted the chamber's light into blinding prisms. She lifted a single finger, and a cascade of luminous sigils ignited across the ceiling. From those sigils descended a winged stellar drake, scales burning like newborn suns. It circled her once before landing at her side, folding its wings in allegiance. Cheers shook the hall. A third contender, armored in relic metal, slammed a spear into the dais. A shockwave rolled outward in concentric rings. From beneath the stone rose a many-limbed titan forged of molten alloy and bone, chains snapping as it knelt in violent submission. Each display grew louder, brighter, more overwhelming. Energy flared in colors beyond human perception. Bonds sealed in cascading light. The High Scion observed with cool satisfaction as power manifested exactly as tradition promised. "This," the commander proclaimed, voice resonating through every tier, "is convergence." Then, human designation, Arun Malik. A ripple of amusement passed through the hall. Arun stepped forward. No aura. No weapon. Just a grease-stained sleeve and steady breathing. He stood at the center of the dais. The summoning sigils beneath his boots ignited in precise geometric layers. The air thickened. The ceiling galaxy dimmed in anticipation. The gate behind him opened. Light poured outward. The hall held its breath. Nothing emerged. Seconds stretched uncomfortably long. The sigils flickered, recalibrated, then glowed brighter, as if trying harder. Still nothing. Arun glanced over his shoulder at the empty radiance. "Is it supposed to do that?" he asked quietly. Laughter exploded across the balconies. Not restrained. Not polite. Open. Mocking. The commander's lip curled faintly. As expected. The High Scion did not laugh. But neither did they intervene. Arun remained standing at the center of a ceremony built for power. And nothing happened. The laughter stopped. Not faded. Stopped. It was as if the sound had been cut from existence mid-echo. Thousands of voices silenced in the same impossible instant. Even the reverberation died unnaturally, swallowed by something deeper than quiet. Arun hadn't moved. The summoning gate behind him flickered once. Then every sensor array in the convergence hall began to fail. Displays did not climb toward overload. They fractured. Energy readings splintered into meaningless glyphs. Measurement crystals cracked down their centers. The hovering diagnostic orbs above the dais burst into fine, glittering dust. The instruments did not spike. They shattered. Across the chamber, the bonded creatures reacted first. The void beast recoiled, gravitational field collapsing inward as it lowered its massive head. The stellar drake folded its blazing wings tightly against its body, light dimming to a subdued ember. The molten titan trembled, chains rattling, not in rage. In fear. Every entity turned toward the human. The air thickened, not with pressure, but with depth. As though reality itself had gained weight. A thin fracture split the space above the summoning gate. Not an explosion. A seam. Darkness leaked through, not absence of light, but something older than illumination. The galaxy ceiling above flickered and went dim, stars blinking out one by one. The High Scion rose abruptly from their throne. "No," they whispered. The fracture widened soundlessly. From within it, something vast began to descend, not forcing its way into existence, but unfolding, as if it had always occupied a higher dimension and merely chose to lower itself. Its form defied stable outline. Constellations shifted across its surface. Ancient symbols, older than the Accord, older than their myths, burned faintly within its silhouette. Recognition rippled through the chamber. This was not a bondable beast. This was not a weapon. This was a star god. The oldest one. It did not roar. It did not blaze. It descended until it loomed behind Arun like a living horizon. And then it lowered itself. Not in alignment. Not in ritual convergence. In submission. The difference was unmistakable. Arun blinked up at the vast presence, grease still on his sleeve, confusion plain on his face. He had not summoned it. He had not claimed it. Yet the oldest being in the cosmos had bent the knee. To a human engineer who fixed broken things. No proclamation followed. No anthem. No cosmic voice declaring destiny fulfilled. The star god remained lowered behind Arun, its vast form dimming the galaxy ceiling to embers. The High Scion stood motionless. The Grand Commander did not dare reach for a weapon that would have meant nothing. Arun shifted awkwardly under the weight of attention. "I didn't ask for this," he said quietly. The ancient being did not answer. It did not need to. Across the chamber, the other bonded entities stayed bowed, not to Arun's authority, but to the presence that had chosen to acknowledge him. And that was the fracture in the Accord's certainty. They had always believed power flowed from height to depth. From god to ruler. From ruler to warrior. From warrior to beast. But this was different. The star god had not been summoned. It had responded. Not to dominance. Not to lineage. Not to spectacle. To alignment. Every power in the galaxy was a reflection. The void air reflected gravity. The Drake Rider reflected stellar flame. The Titan Bearer reflected destruction. They mirrored forces already present in the universe. Humans carried something older. Not force. Not brilliance. Not supremacy. Foundation. They repaired failing systems no one else valued. They adapted to broken environments instead of abandoning them. They endured collapse, and then rebuilt in the ruins. Where others commanded power, humans maintained it. Where others conquered worlds, humans kept them functional. The star gods were not embodiments of domination. They were custodians of structure, of balance written into the bones of the cosmos. And Arun, kneeling beside fractured conduits and misaligned currents, had done something profoundly simple. He had corrected instability. Not with power. With understanding. The ancient being had not bowed to strength. It had recognized the original pattern. All empires were temporary architectures. Humans were the repair mechanism beneath them. Every power in the galaxy was a reflection. Humans carried the original. And the oldest of the stars had answered accordingly. The emergency council convened before the echoes of submission had faded. The convergence hall was sealed. The star god had withdrawn beyond visible dimension, though its presence lingered like gravity after impact. Arun had been escorted, not roughly, but not gently either, to a containment chamber lined with null-field emitters. Now the High Scions stood before a circular assembly of Accord elders, their forms flickering in agitation. "This is not convergence," one declared. "It is inversion." "He did not bond," another hissed. The entity submitted. A projection replayed the moment again and again, the fracture in reality, the descent, the bow. Silence followed each repetition. Finally, the Grand Commander spoke. "The human is a catalyst." "A weapon," an elder corrected. Arun watched through the transparent barrier, unaware that his image was being dissected in a chamber beyond. "I fix relays," he muttered to himself, examining the faint hum in the containment field. "Why does everything here buzz wrong?" Inside the council chamber, the debate sharpened. If the star gods respond to him, then he cannot be allowed autonomy. "Containment," the commander said firmly. "Permanent. Study the mechanism. Replicate if possible." Outside, technicians increased the null field output. The air around Arun thickened. He frowned and touched the wall. The hum intensified, unstable, oscillating out of phase. The emitters were misaligned, creating feedback loops through their own lattice. "That's going to fail," he murmured. He wasn't angry. He wasn't afraid. He simply reacted. He pressed both palms against the containment barrier and adjusted his stance instinctively, the way he would brace against a vibrating conduit. He shifted pressure, altering resonance. The field responded. Not with a surge. With correction. Across the chamber, the null field grid synchronized to his rhythm. Emitters flared, then steadied. In the council hall, lights flickered. Energy diagnostics spiked off-chart, then normalized into a perfect harmonic wave. "He is interfacing," an elder whispered. Arun blinked as the barrier in front of him dissolved into harmless particles. He hadn't forced it. He had stabilized it. Behind him, space rippled. A faint outline of the star god shimmered briefly, present but restrained. The Grand Commander rose slowly. "He does not attack," he said, voice tight. The High Scions' gaze darkened. "No," they replied. "He corrects." And for the first time, the galaxy understood its fear. Not of destruction, but of being rewritten. Arun Malik was elbow-deep inside a malfunctioning plasma conduit when they stopped calling him Asset. The requests had slowed first. Then the summons. Then the carefully worded invitations from the Celestial Accord offering advisory positions, ceremonial titles, symbolic stewardship over interstellar stability. He declined them all. Now Orbital Relay K-47 hummed the way it always had, uneven, temperamental, familiar. The station was old. Just like everything humans owned in this galaxy. Deck plating rattled when bulk freighters docked too hard. The gravity grid still dipped a fraction of a percent near the agricultural ring. Half the lighting strips flickered if you didn't kick the right junction panel. Arun lay on his back in the maintenance crawlspace, shoulders wedged between pipes, fingers slick with coolant and grease. Some things never changed. "Pressure's drifting again," a technician called from down the corridor. "Yeah, I can hear it," Arun replied. He could. There was a faint harmonic wobble in the conduit's hum, barely noticeable unless you'd spent years listening to failing systems. He adjusted the coupling manually, tightening it by feel rather than by readout. The diagnostic tablet clipped to his belt still occasionally displayed strange, unreadable fluctuations, residual artifacts from the day reality had cracked. He ignored them. Above the station, trade lanes had stabilized in ways they never had before. Several unstable star systems had quietly corrected orbital decay. Ancient gravitational anomalies, once blamed for divine will, now behaved with suspicious consistency. The Accord never officially credited him. They didn't need to. Arun tightened the bolt. The conduit steadied. Coolant flow normalized. The hum smoothed into something reliable. A junior tech lingered nearby, hesitant. "Is it true," she asked softly, "that the star gods still watch you?" Arun wiped his hands on a rag already ruined beyond redemption. "They don't watch me," he said. "They watch for instability." She glanced nervously toward the viewport, where distant stars shimmered peacefully. "And if something breaks?" Arun slid out from beneath the conduit and picked up his worn toolkit, repaired, welded, functional again. "Then someone fixes it." He didn't glow. He didn't command fleets. He didn't summon ancient beings with a gesture. He recalibrated failing systems. He cleared clogged filters. He patched hull fractures no one else prioritized. Because no matter how many gods had bowed, no matter how many warships had powered down in silent recognition, he was still a human engineer on an aging station at the edge of civilized space. He tightened the final bolt and listened to the structure settle into balance. He fixed broken things. And the galaxy had been broken for a very long time.